Hello, welcome to another Totally Rewarding Chats. I'm Paul Reiman. As always, I'm here with Sean Luitjens. Sean?
Hello, Mr. Ryman.
Yeah, I didn't cue you in with the say hi, Sean, so you
I
could
know,
say
I don't
hi,
know,
Sean.
so I have to save that for only when you say
That's
hi.
right. The dad joke gets
Yep.
saved. And I'm excited in particular to be joined today by Mr. Jesper Helt. Hi, Jesper. Good to see you.
Good to see you, Paul.
Yeah.
Again.
I'll have Jesper do his own bio in a second, but if those who listen regularly know, when we wanted to talk about the partnership between rewards and TA, I brought on my old TA partner. So today we're going to talk about sort of the CHRO's perspective and how they think about partnering with rewards, what they need from rewards. And Jesper was my CHRO at one of my corporate stops. So he's going to decide if I'm sort of the good or the bad version of some of his expectations. And we'll talk about like what makes it work, what do CHROs need, and how should rewards people think about it. So that's the focus today. And we thought who better than somebody who knows directly what it was like to deal with me.
Yeah.
So Jesper, just so I probably could do this, but I'm not going to try. Why don't you just give us a quick background and bio, who you are, where you were, just to orient the audience to your background.
Yeah, happy to. Yes, who am I and how I've gotten here? As you can tell from my thick accent, I am not a native to the US. I am a native to Denmark, but I have not really lived or worked in Denmark for the past 30 years. I started my career there, a bit of consulting, then I moved into pharmaceuticals with Novo Nordisk, that many people know today as the Ozempic company. That back then it was a diabetes care company, pre-Ozempic. But I moved around with them from Denmark to 3 years in Vienna, 3 years in Prague, then on to Princeton, New Jersey. At which point in time, after I guess 13 years, I had an opportunity to change into tech. I joined HP and moved with my family out to the Bay Area. Spent a good 8-10 years in Bay Area, both in HP, but then on to more software tech, SuccessFactors back in the day, before they became part of SAP. Then a short stint in a marketing technology company called Velti, and then to Commvault, which is a SaaS data protection, data recovery company, where I had one of the highlights of my career from a hiring perspective when I brought Paul on board, or tricked him into joining, I guess, but we can talk more about that. And yeah, those last couple of stints were as a chief people officer, including at Commvault. Then I had a short stint in energy, green tech, in a company called EOS, also out of New Jersey. And then more recently, like 4.5 years ago, I joined Samsara, which is by all accounts the fastest growing SaaS company in history, I think. It's a little bit of SaaS and a bit of hardware as well, but an Internet of Things company, which took me to London, where I am now, heading up the people team for Europe and India. So that's the short version. Apart from that, I'm of course not all work. I also have a family. I am happily married for 34
You got to
years.
know the number, man.
Yeah, no, I should have, but I just need to do the calculation. Yeah, 34 years coming up, and have 3 now fully grown kids that are still kids in our eyes, but not in their own. So, but
It's nice when they come off the payroll. We can tease Paul how they're off the payroll now. The kids are off the payroll. Paul's are not off the payroll.
Nope.
No, and neither are mine. That I have learned. That's something you keep telling yourself, and then somehow it just doesn't happen. But yeah.
Yeah, I having met Jesper's family, I tell people all the time it takes a special person to be married to me. So like if you know my wife, you're like, okay, that makes a lot of sense. It takes a special person probably to be married to Jesper too, and Pernille is absolutely a good match, right? A great match. No, that's great. So thank you for that background. Let's do a couple of quick sort of just additional get to know you questions. And I think I know the answer to almost all these. So coffee or tea?
Coffee, lots of it. Black.
All the time.
All the time, yes.
That's a good thing.
One of the few people I've met that will have a triple espresso at like 9 p.m. after a long dinner. Like, okay,
Makes me
I'd
feel
be
like
up
a
all
baby.
night. Yeah, that's right. You've lived a lot of places. Favorite place that you've lived?
Ooh, I think London is up there. I must say, moving to London when you became an empty nester and being able to enjoy a little of less suburban life has been absolutely a treat. But I will say Prague. Being in Prague in like around 2000, not that long after the wall came down, it was kind of frontier country, or a town, but it was just also such a special time, such an adventurous time that has a very special place in my heart.
There you go. Your favorite football club?
There's one and one only. Well, there's two. I have a Danish one. But
I was going to say, I'm hoping there's a second answer to this now.
Yeah,
knowing a little bit about.
There is. But I'm a diehard Arsenal fan or Gooner. Have been since I, at the age of 6, got enlisted or enrolled in the Arsenal fan club by my mom, who was a school teacher and thought that was a great way of inspiring me to get exposed to English back in the day. But I have stuck with them ever since. Now I live in North London, so I even had the chance to go to the Emirates and watch the game against Chelsea this past weekend. So yes, very, very hopeful for the season.
Yeah. But I'm hoping
you don't have any gray after the end of that match. No gray hair, so that's also impressive.
I just went to have a haircut this morning, Sean, because I knew I was going to be on this show, so I had to look my best. But that also removed some of the gray. Yeah.
But I was expecting
I also have
maybe
FC Copenhagen, which is my Danish team. Yeah.
I mean, let's also describe, like, you have a daughter who plays very high level competitive soccer in the grand scheme of things too. Like, so yeah, you can't leave her squad out just the same.
No, that is true. I do. And she, I don't know if you know this, but after her collegiate career, where she became actually British champion with St Andrews University, she is now at London School of Economics, and she moved down to London, moved back in with us, and is now a Millwall Lioness. So she plays for one of the like really old, proper East End clubs in London, which is absolutely amazing to go and watch her. Such a treat.
I will say though, like maybe it's because she's there. She's inspiring Millwall, who are in the top 6, in the championship, working their way towards Premier League. So it must be her inspiration that's moving them forward.
I'm
yes,
sure
Sean,
that's it.
I would not exclude that.
That's right. You and just your wife, we're going to clarify, no kids, are getting a weekend away. Are you going to spend it in a nice posh hotel somewhere, or are you going to spend it camping in the woods?
The former, because I am not the decision maker on things like this. But Pernille has made very clear that the days, I mean, there were days back in our youth where it was camping, but those days are long gone, and she is not, and we are not made for camping life anymore.
See, it's funny. So this is I'm very much the camping, as is my wife, Jesper. But the very beginning of that is exactly the same, despite the end being different. The fact that I'm not in charge of anything. I like how you just started with like it. Actually, my opinion doesn't matter. So. That's fair. I get that. In the 30+ year club, that's how you get to the 30+ year club.
That's right.
Yeah, that is one strategy.
Yeah.
My dad always told me, he actually told me on my wedding day that the trick to a long marriage, which he and my mom also had, was that you manage to make your partner feel that they decide 51%, when as a matter of fact, they only decide 49%. I'm not sure. Not sure if I'm really successful in that, but it's a very clever thought.
Yeah, I didn't know. The way I phrase it has been, we decided that she would make all the big decisions and I would make all the little decisions. But luckily, there haven't been any little decisions yet, so I've done well. Yeah.
Since we're comparing marriage advice, sort of our version is we split the finances. Paul makes the money and Kim spends the money. Like, that's sort of our way of describing the happy marriage, right?
The secret is always whatever works. You gotta figure it out. Like nobody's advice is worth anything, actually.
That's exactly right. Last speed round question. Crunchy or creamy peanut butter?
Ooh, I am not a peanut butter guy at all. Well, I mean, well, it would be creamy because the only way I like peanut butter is when my wife makes it in, or when Pernille makes it into a peanut butter sauce with fresh spring rolls.
There you go.
So it would be creamy. No crunch.
No, we over the course, I actually did not realize until this podcast how sort of U.S. centric peanut butter really is as well. Like, it's just not as much a global thing, and we're raised on it here, and it's just not the way it works.
When I'm in London, it makes choice easy, because when you go to London, there's usually a jar of creamy and a jar of crunchy. That's it. There's no then other choices. Here we have entire aisles of peanut butter, but there's you go to Sainsbury's and there's just one of each. That's your choice.
One of each. Yeah. No more shelves needed.
That's
Isn't it
right.
like the World Series? Not really being the World Series, isn't it?
Yeah.
So let's dig in a bit. You've had a variety of HR roles, but you've sat in the CHRO seat. You have been the CHRO at a number of companies, including one where you hired me. So let's start with actually, I might go a little out of sequence. You don't come from a comp background. You're not a rewards person, right? You're the CHRO, but you didn't ever really do that. So how do you think that affected your view of rewards as a CHRO, right? So you're in the chair and you've got accountability for it. It's not your thing. So how have you thought about that when you've been in that chair?
Listen, so first of all, it was one of the things I realized when I, at one point in my career, a bit into it, thought, hey, I would actually like to pursue a CHRO role. I was also very upset and daunted by the fact that when I then spoke to whatever the big search agencies, they looked at me and said, yes, but you can forget about that because you don't have any total rewards experience, and you have not really been dealing with a board or anything. And that was kind of my first. I had not even thought of that being an absolute, critical. It's not like a must-have, but it is certainly something that is obviously very, very attractive. So I tried to be in a position to get a little bit closer to that, partly successful, but never really headed total rewards, to your point, Paul. So the way I first of all thought of it is that, in terms of complementarity, right, that I, as with all my hires, I need to bring people in that are really good at the things I am not good at, and that is a fairly long list. So I need to surround myself with something that in totality becomes something worthwhile, right? So that's the one thing, the complementarity. But then I think as I got in to kind of that head role, really realizing and getting visibility to the budget, really realizing how much money, how much investment, right? How much OpEx is sitting in the people side of things, right? Where I was used to gunning around and asking hand in hand for budget for L&D initiatives or this, that, and the other, and then all of a sudden you realize, hey, there's 80%, if not more, of the spend that is sitting in rewards, and it was a bit nerve-wracking, right? Because I think being partly having responsibility for that and responsibility for shaping and influencing how that is spent, that was a bit of a journey for me, because that's a big number, right? And at first you think, oh, this makes me feel important, but then it is a bit humbling that you realize, hey, don't view it just as how can we do this programmatically and get it over with and done, because you really need to think wisely about the spend there.
Yeah, no, that's great. And then I guess given that, because you're then needing to find people to be a steward of that important problem. What skills did you find you prioritized? What experiences? How did you? I mean, you've had to hire a number of us. I could put myself in that club, right? You had to pick something. So what were your priorities? What were the things that either complimented you or that you felt are non-negotiable? Oh my gosh, I need people who can think a certain way because of that perspective.
No, but I think, first of all, there are certain fundamentals, right? Just in terms of spreadsheet wizardry and being really good with numbers and analytics. No, but that is important, right? It is really important to me to be able to let's say, data storytell. I think that to me, I have found to be one of the key differentiators between good and great total rewards partners, to me at least. That is the ability to tell that story using data, using numbers, but also making it accessible to non-comp people. I would also say one of the things because I think there is kind of a tendency that a lot of compensation teams and professionals become very preoccupied in terms of making sure that we follow the rules. And you know, there's a structure, and the structure is there to be followed. And it very quickly becomes, I think, stifling. Part of that is maybe because, you know, one of my makeup is I am I don't like to comply. I like to do things and test limits. I think rules are there to be broken, but I think I have infused a little bit of that into how I also like my total rewards partner or head of total rewards to think and operate, because I think that flexibility is super important to me, but I also find it's important to the business, because at the end of the day, yes, we are of course trusted with the responsibility of that big envelope of money that is being spent on compensation or rewards, but more than anything, we are there to solve business problems, and they come in many forms, and it is really about the problem and the solving of that rather than the adherence to, say, a process or a structure or a philosophy. That I think, you know, is how I like to operate.
Totally. No, I stumbled. I didn't stumble. I searched for it once I realized that it overlapped. But there's a podcast interview I did. It wasn't my podcast. I was being interviewed for a podcast while I was working for you at Commvault. And there's a section that basically tells my view of that exact same story. It's like, how do you become a more permissive provider of intelligence, not a sort of rule creator, rule enforcer? You know, in the side story of that, particularly in that, because that was not my mindset prior to when we partnered together. It was realizing that we had leaders who knew a lot, like really smart people that, you know, to your point, because it was over 75% of their spend was their people, that is their business problem. Like, if they're thinking of their organization as a P&L, I want to own this. And an engineering leader who really wanted to do it well, like, his heart was 100% in the right place, coming in and saying, no, you can't do it that way. It's not going to be successful. It's more, what do you need from us? How can we work together? You know, say yes before you say no more often than not became sort of the mantra. It had to be sort of relevant and successful.
Yeah, because I mean, that is not only rewards, right? That's, I think, more generally true for the people function, right? But we don't want to fall into the trap that we tend to fall in often, right? Which is like the insurance claims department, where you call and the answer is in the outside no, right? I mean, that's just not a good way to kick off a partnership.
Yeah, totally.
It's interesting you guys say that, though, and I think it's unique, having seen a lot of program, Jesper, because there's safety in the box, though, right? And I think there's a lot of people are like, but that's the answer, and it's not my fault, and that's the, you know, you can go somewhere else. And so, while it kind of makes sense when you say it, I do think it is unique, but also an opportunity for some departments to kind of start with that. But I think I wouldn't say they start like an insurance claim; they start with no. But I think the first question is, are you in the box of what we've set with our pay philosophy? Yes or no? And then it is much like an insurance claim. You know, no, it's not in the box. I'm going to fight you all the way to the end, despite how much rationale you have. So it's cool to hear that that's the mantra at the start.
Yeah. I think we also, as comp people, and I fall victim to this too, like, because that Excel wizardry, like analytical thinking, we love the data, is in our DNA. Like, almost everybody who grows up in rewards, that's in your DNA. We then become a little bit too dogmatic about the data. You know, so more recently, you and I have had conversations about, like, yeah, but like, the data just might not be what you think it is, right? That trusted source may not actually reflect who you really need to attract in Prague. Right? Like, that data might not be great. You need to back off a little bit and say, no, I get it. Like, that job should be a P4 or whatever, But I know, like, it just doesn't work, right? So, like, how do you discuss and get off the data to an extent and say, yeah, like, there's time to put the real world in perspective, and we can't find anybody for that amount of money who we would want to hire. And
Right.
now it's time to break the rule. It's not a P5 anymore. It's not the benchmark.
Exactly. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Then it doesn't
That's
matter.
the
Right? It
irony with
doesn't
the
matter
data,
that
right,
you
Paul? Like, I think that's always the irony with the data. Are you willing to be the yes? Because otherwise you have to wait till critical mass have said yes, right? So you think about that rule, right? Because the data source itself is statistically a thing.
Pulling
So
you
enough
back
of
towards,
them, yeah, it's all pulling. And so until enough of them, so do you want to be at the front end of that, you know, the teeter totter pulling stuff forward, or do you want to wait until you get to whatever the crux of the math is on that? And that's an interesting way to look at it from let's see if we should rightly so be in front.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. No,
Totally.
very much so.
Yeah.
We just had the case, there's more on the benefit side, right? But also where we had a probably over-reliance on our benchmarking data until we changed the provider, right? We had a lot of the part of the business, this was out in India, saying, hey, this does not sound right. This does not sound aligned with what we say our benefits philosophy is. And we said, yeah, well, but here's the data and we know, and yes, it is. And it was a noise that were not going away, right? It kept coming up. And then we ended up changing provider. And true enough, we then find out that their benchmarking cut was including a lot of companies we really shouldn't compare ourselves with. And what the business and the organization had been telling us were not too far off what we actually needed to get to. But yeah, that's a classic mistake.
Totally. I guess that leads me to a related topic. So you've led a number of awards people, right? Some incredible and some probably less so. And I'll let you decide, but not publicly, which camp I'm in. And you've mentioned like that storytelling, like that's a key thing. Are there other examples in your mind that have differentiated sort of the great versus the less? And it can be in both directions. Like, no, a really standout capability is this, or I find that what's holding back rewards people is always this thing. Like, are there other examples of skills or tendencies that you have found that rewards people should know that from your chair make a difference and you would prioritize?
Yeah. Let's see. I mean, I mentioned the flexibility, right? That you're really interested in solving business problems rather than comp problems, I think is important. I also think one of the difference between good and great is also whether how much broader you think than your subject matter expertise, right? Because the really strong rewards professionals, I find, is also thinking L&D, is also thinking people partnering, engagement, and not just thinking comp, right? Because that is where it starts to be powerful when you think about, again, how do we deliver a business outcome or solve a business problem holistically, given what we as a people function are representing. And I am going to spill the beans that, yes, I very much, Paul, find that you are one such, and I think everybody who has worked with you, right, find you that, yes, you are a nerd when it comes to comp, you are an absolute subject matter expert, a Sheldon, as I think you were nicknamed, but at the same time, you are also very capable and with perspective when it comes to recruiting, engagement, development. So
to the point where you had to give me up for a year, basically, right? You kind of sent me into the wolves in sales ops for a year because they needed some help and had to do some double duty for a while.
Very much so, right? Driving change management. Let me see, what else would I say? I mean, there is clearly an element, and this goes a little bit back to what we discussed before. I love flexibility. I like to break rules, but at the same time, I also acknowledge that the best, and this maybe is about the complementarity. My best comp partners are also the ones that can hit me over the head with a 2x4 and say, yes, but that's good, and it's good to be flexible, but there's also a bigger picture, right? There's also a bigger picture of making sure that, our rewards practices are not biased, and it's the same here as it is over there, or at least it is defensible if there is a difference. So there's a little bit of also keeping me honest, or keeping your CHRO honest, and not being afraid to challenge back, right? But that holds true for any leader, of course.
Yeah. No, that's like your desire for flexibility was something that when I moved on and took my next role, I put a big emphasis, and it's something I learned a lot when we were working together, is the difference between, and this is my words, and I'm not suggesting you're not saying this, but flexibility versus agility. And when in my next role, we said, look, flexibility is when you kind of break the rules. Agility is your willingness to change the rules, right? And change the way that you want to approach something. And you just want to know when you're doing each one, right? Flexibility is making an exception. There's reasons for that, right? Or, okay, this isn't perfect, but it'll work. You're recommending an incentive design. Like I get it. Like what I want isn't right. Let's be flexible in how we come to an outcome. But agility is different. And that's where like eventually, like, okay, this is a pattern. This is our new norm. Let's change, right? Like we're always arguing about the benchmark. We just want to pay more. Great. If everybody's on board, change our mindset, right? Let's not debate what the rules are if we're changing the rules, right? So it was some language I needed to implement at my next org, which is, are we being flexible or are we being agile? Which is it? Because the way that we talk about this, the way that we refer to it in the future depends on which play we're making.
Yeah, that's a very good distinction, by the way. Yeah, that's a very good point, Paul. Because that, of course, is at the end of the day also what doesn't scale, right? Exception after exception after exception.
That's right.
I mean, there's a reason, there's a saying, when the exclusion's the rule, right? Like, that's the point at which you have to, analyze why do we have all the exclusions.
That's right. One hot topic these days, ironically, is something that I know you and I spent a lot of time debating going on 9 years ago at this point, which is we spend a ton of time as rewards people suffering over the comp cycle, right? And differentiating, and I've got a 3.5% budget. Who's going to get 3? Who's going to get 4? Who's going to get 5? And you were the first CHRO to look at me and say, why the hell are we doing this? Like, would we be better off giving everybody 2.5 and like doing this differently? So I guess, and I'm seeding that, but like, that's one example where you looked at what we were doing for years and said, something just doesn't feel exactly right here. Now, we didn't throw everything out the next day, like, just so everybody's clear. Like, it was a thoughtful debate. I believe it was like a 4-hour dinner that we sort of really hashed out, like, what's good, what's bad about this. But are there other, like, I'm curious, like, what led you to that conclusion? Or if you want to change the topic, that's fine too. Are there other examples of things you've seen rewards people do that you're like, why is this a thing? Like, why are we doing this?
No, let me comment on that, because I vividly remember when we were discussing that and exploring.
That's because you had 4 triple espressos. That's why you remember. But yeah, okay. I'm not surprised you remember because you weren't asleep.
It was a very animated conversation.
That could be, Sean. And I was not ready to go to bed, something like that. But also, no, because I remember we were sitting back side of the napkin and trying to estimate how many, through a comp cycle, how many thousands of decisions, mini decisions were made, right? And I also, as a manager, I know how seriously I took sitting there, like moving, a 0.2 here to there, and I forget what number we came up with, but it was like tens of thousands of decisions for a 3,000 people population that was being made and reviewed and calibrated and challenged and God knows what. Exactly for what. So I would say on that point, it is interesting. So Samsara, where I'm at now, at least in sales, right? I have now for 4 years been working with what we call a snap to grid approach, right? Where we are paying sellers that are doing the same, negotiating salaries. We're not using a rate. We are paying them the point. I would have said, forget about it. We are not going to get the talent. It doesn't come without challenges. That's not what I'm saying, but it does really simplify a lot, right? I must say. So that's interesting. I would say one of the other things that I've been thinking, I mean, this is a little more sales comp related. I have always been kind of a bit skeptical about, of course, you run to a number in sales and you run to your quota number. and it very quickly becomes as if that is kind of sent from above, that there is science to the quota number. But it's clear to everybody that it's a bit of a crapshoot, right? At least it is not an exact science. Of course, data are going in and analysis is going into it, but sometimes you're just wrong. Sometimes things unforeseen happen, or you didn't have the right data. And we are still kind of insisting that not only are we paying according to how much you attain, but we are also equating that to a performance rating, which then leads us to say whether you are high potential or not. That's kind of where total rewards and kind of talent development starts to overlap, right? But where I go, don't we need to be a little more critical about that data point, because it is one out of several, and I think we have a tendency to overestimate the importance of it.
Yeah, no, it's a good call out where a really like the butterfly effect is large, right? Being a quota achiever means a lot for a seller. And is it really resting upon sort of a solid foundation? You know, if we're honest about it, I think you're right. Like more often than not, there is judgment and there is inevitably some form of bias built in. Bias might be in a okay way, right? It's more like I just trust that Jesper's going to hit the number. I'm going to give him a bigger one. Like that's a bias. That's a shortcut, but that could penalize you if we're not careful. And yeah, it's an interesting. I mean, I think there's other examples of performance measurement that same way too, where any objective, right? This is your OKR. I didn't hit it. Does that make me bad this year? Yeah. Yes or no? I mean, the OKR concept was invented to sort of help mitigate some of that risk, but you know, I think any performance measurement can run fault if you're not careful about what was the goal. Yeah.
And I think also, I mean, a little in an extension to that, I mean, I am just as I have been reflecting, also going into this conversation, but also having now been with different companies, different comp philosophies, some that I was kind of instrumental in shaping, and others that I kind of inherited, and where a big part of it is going, you know, this whole thing about differentiation and how closely you tie individual performance and output or outcomes with what you base your compensation on, how important it really is. Or if we are greatly overestimating how people are driven by how they can impact their bonus. I tend to believe, or tend to come to the conclusion that we are probably exaggerating that quite a bit, and that you can put comp structures in place that kind of reward more collectively, still have a very high performance and very driven and very ambitious, pushy culture, but you don't need to nitty-gritty it down to Paul did this much more than Jesper, and then there was Sean, because we are lifting as a team. Of course, it depends on the culture. There needs to be a level of alignment. But I have been intrigued to see how, also how, I guess, how little informed, how often these decisions, how we spend this big bucket of money and how we distribute it, is tied to belief systems or anecdotes, typically of the senior leader, right? It's not tied to really proof points and data points and science that tells you how human behavior is going to treat one way or the other.
Yeah. Well, and part of it's because there isn't great science, to be honest, right? Like the actual science of what is going to work. And it's because of the reason I think you cited. Like, it's a very complex ecosystem of how do all these things really fit together. And I've been in organizations and places where we had flat salary increase for everybody with market adjustments when we needed to do it. I've been in places where we've differentiated. And I think they both worked in that context because of other things that were going on. You know, and humans are weird, complex people where, like, my 4% raise versus a 3% is actually not a big, meaningful difference. But boy, did it feel good that I got more than the pool, right? Like, that matters to me, and it signaled that you valued me, or whatever the answer is, right? So, like, it's a complex, multi-dimensional ecosystem that you have to really get your arms around and just make a good choice that's backed by some psychology, I think, is probably the real answer. But it's a hard thing. So I'm glad people are questioning it, because I think we've got lots of dogma that's ready to die. You know, but people have to raise their hand and say,
it fixes a couple of things. There's two things that always come out of that. Like, if you say you're giving a 3% increase, I always, ask people like, what percent do you think people think they're getting? And nobody thinks they're getting 3%, right? Everybody thinks they're getting more, right? Screw the other guy, right? So I like, there's a part of that and the simplicity to it. But I am perplexed over time. You create a merit matrix off performance and all this stuff that nobody goes back actually and looks at the merit matrix and basically said our hypothesis in the merit matrix was people would stay for this reason or they'd do whatever, and go back and just plug the same people in there and be like, who's still here? Like, because the example I use a lot is the premise always is that the low performer somewhere, right? We give them 0, right? That's our goal, because management's like, well, they'll leave. And I'm like, or they'll decide that I still can do less to get fired. Like, right? Like I still have room to do worse, right? And so like, is that really, learn over time what happened to that group? Because if that becomes your lowest turnover group, like there's a cost effect that's huge there, but it's not measured in turnover. It's measured in productivity. And you don't have to be a genius to be like, they're your lowest people doing the work. Like that's a thing. So there's a lot, I'm surprised that everyone puts a lot of time and energy, as you meant, Jesper. I never thought of it in the number of decisions, right? That's actually a really interesting way to think about how many micro decisions get made in their thesis, and then go back and check their work at all. Like even at a very high level, like you don't have to go to the nth degree because people are, but statistically go back and be like, did this is what we thought it was going to do. And I always thought it'd be fun. Let's take the over under. Who thought what it's going to be and who's the closest to what actually happens in 6 months or 3 months to the humans.
Yeah. We had a good rhythm of measuring back outcomes when we worked together, in part, and I tell this story a lot, we had several natural experiments that existed in that organization because the engineering team did operate differently, right? So like the organization at large approached performance and pay one way, and when we started, engineering approached it a different way. And we did a lot of work, I don't know if you remember all of it, where it's like, are the outcomes different? Are the outcomes the same? Because it was the same company, same culture-ish, but different performance management strategy and different reward systems. And like the fascinating outcome is it was the same, right? Like engineering wasn't given a merit matrix, but guess what? Managers still differentiated about the same as people that we gave guidance to. They wanted to do it that way, right? Like smart people want to reward high performance. It was a fascinating comparison of like, we didn't tell them to do it because they wouldn't let us tell them to do it at first, but they did it anyway. So it's like, well, yeah, like smart people in the same place. We just thought we disagreed, but we did measure it and we quantified it. And that's when people are like, oh, I guess this isn't so scary. Let's get on the same page. But you've got to look at the numbers to sort of prove out what actually happened and did it work.
But it's an interesting, and you know more about this than I do, but designing comp programs around the psychology, which I guess we do in part, right? But for instance, I remember this came from you, Paul, where we were dealing with high attrition in our sales force. We were also dealing with quite a big part of the population that were not hitting quota, thus not making the OTE that they had signed up for, that they were hoping for. And where you made this very, very provocative suggestion that we should design so a seller felt a level of success every 3 quarters or 4 quarters, whatever, I forget what the number was. But this whole notion that if we just stick with that attainment number we gave them, rather than changing it maybe so they at least have a quarterly success during the year, that would most likely result in people staying behind and maybe becoming fully ramped, becoming better sales professionals for that particular product market, right? But we are very reluctant to do something like this, right?
Yeah.
No, anyway.
Yeah. Just to make sure, Sean won't let me off the hook if I don't go there. And I want to make sure there's time for it. So let me have it, right? Like share a story that you think people should know about me from sort of the inside. This is where I get a little nervous because there's always fun stories that can come out. Although I'm pretty sure I know where one of them is going to go, but you just never know with you, Jesper, where you're going to take this.
The best part of that whole thing, while you're thinking this, Jesper, the best part of that whole thing is it's not like, hey, tell that one story.
Right.
Like the fact that he's like, there is a bevy of stories. Select one of your choosing is very interesting. So that's what I've taken away, Paul. We're
That's
getting
right.
the cold down, probably G-rated one here.
Yeah. You never know. We'll see. Yeah.
The problem with that is that there's potentially, I can at least not exclude, also stories going the other way. So
That's
I of
right.
course need to be mindful of that, right? You may reciprocate. No, but first of all, I have to share this with you, Paul. I have to share this. Coming out of the comp cycle, just a couple of weeks ago in our case, I was sitting talking to Valerie, that you know, who is our head of compensation, that you have worked with a little bit. And I was saying that, and I just got this email from Paul asking me to join his podcast. And guess what she said? She said, oh, Paul, he is the most wonderful person in the world. And then she went on to thank me for having introduced you to her and to Samsara. And I was going like, yes, this is how I think
Val
about
a Christmas card. Like, clearly I've got a sort of...
Now we're going to have to find a way in our recording tool to make the screen bigger to fit Paul's head.
to fit my head.
No, but that speaks volumes of who you are. But anyway, I think the story I would love to share is when you rewrote the ABBA song "Dancing Queen" into "Workday Queen" or "Queens," if I remember correctly.
Plural.
So yeah.
Too.
Queen. So the story here is, I think, something, and you correct me, Paul, but I had thought, I had come up with the ingenious and very low budget recognition program in the HR department, because we were trying to shake up the HR department from being a little like the claims department in the insurance company to be a much more out there, engaging, easygoing team. And I had introduced this was around the time when the Horton is a Hoot movie had come out. So Horton, this little elephant, the Dr. Seuss elephant, had become, since it has HR in it, became kind of our trophy that we gave out once a quarter. Not with a whole lot of rigor to who would get it, other than they got nominated, they did some good stuff, and we were happy about it. And that went on for a while, and then Paul came in and go like, yeah, but what are the criteria and what is the structure? And don't you think, is it differentiated enough? And are we sure that we reward the high performers, or are we celebrating mediocre performers? All these challenging questions. I don't know. Anyway, so Paul kind of killed Horton, first of all. But then secondly, after we had done our Workday implementation, which was a big endeavor.
Big deal, right? That's a
big deal. No, a huge deal. And there were a couple of people, Kara and Kelly on Paul's team, that had done amazing work. So during our global people team all hands, Paul had then showed up on video with his guitar and then sang this rewritten Dancing Queen song, which was about the Workday Queens. So like this amazing, Samsara or Commvault Got Talent type of performance, was just set the bar so high that nobody ever since could meet that bar. And
do we have this on VHS or anything? Do we have it?
I do have a video. I have it.
I was going through my phone. I go like, I must have recorded this, but I didn't go through. I do
have it. I have it's me, sitting in my living room late at night doing this song. I have it because I shared it with Kelly not that long ago, just because we've kept in touch. And I'm like, do you remember this? And she's like, of course I remember that. But it did become a little bit of this, like, no good deed goes unpunished, right? Because our intent was to make it a big deal. No doubt, right? Like, it was a different type of accomplishment than any other I had seen in my tenure there. So it's like, it needs to be special. But then every other thing we did to try to recognize somebody wasn't special enough, right? It's like, it was just like, wow, like I didn't realize I was going to completely, kill the elephant by trying to be special, right? And it was free. I mean, not that everybody can rewrite a song, but like, it was just putting your own personality into
was.
a way of recognizing, right? It's what I knew how to do, and every leader has something like that where you can sort of make it your own. But it became too unique to an extent, and it made it hard to sustain.
Hard with any rewards I mean, that, the rewards programs themselves is, it's a whole nother, set of episodes around rewards. There's always, rewarding the good is the easiest part of a rewards program, right? Pissing everybody else off at whatever level, that is actually the hardest part of that part of the human nature is really difficult. And so I know that you killed Horton, Paul, but like kind of cool that was small and everybody, and it wasn't enough. Like if someone was to go complain about I didn't get a little elephant, you're like, bruh,
Move
okay,
on, right?
Like, but you didn't get this big thing. And there's always somebody close, right? And then that trickles down. And to me, that's always the hardest part of rewards programs that are the softer rewards is, it's the who didn't get it. And how does that psychologically, like you talked about before, Jesper, like how does that affect everybody else in the company, like moving OTE down or moving the bar down so they feel success? Because if you're not, if you're not the winner, being a competitive person, if you're not the winner, you're one of the losers.
Yeah.
So
for sure. But it's also, to me, it was just also, we spoke about that big pot of money that we are there to administer and make sure get well spent. But then something that is low to no cost, right? The recognition, often overlooked because you can do it so simply, but if you just put a bit of soul into it, right? It becomes so much more meaningful, so much more impactful than whether you got 3 or 4%.
Yeah.
Right?
And that's, Sean, you and I talk a lot about like how much do you blend sort of your not work life with your work life and how much of your personality shows up at work. That was one thing. I kept my work life and my personality completely distinct until I worked with Jesper. And I came in, keep in mind, the first thing people showed me is you realize he made us like lip sync to the song Happy. Like, if you ask somebody, like how important is fun at work on a scale of 0 to 10, Jesper's going to say like a 14, right? And it's because that's his personality, right? So that's where it was like modeled to me. You got to be yourself, and you can be unique, and the way that you do things is okay, right? Playing a song for somebody it wasn't that hard for me because that's just the way my brain works, and you put your personality in it. Not everybody's brain works that way. Like, totally appreciate it. But like it was where I learned to blend a little bit. Like, this is who you are, be who you are, and find a way to make that part of how you work. Because people want humans to work with. They don't just want, Sheldon, the rewards robot, right?
I'm expecting Compensation Mia, the album, or the Broadway show soon now. That's what I got. That's what I got coming.
I love it. Well, as we wrap up, Jesper, we always ask people at the end, if you can magically change one thing about HR, what would it be?
Magically change one thing in HR. Well, I mean, the first thing would be that we stop feeling sorry for ourselves. Then I think, actually, that we get to a point where we have a lot higher transparency. I feel all too often we are, not least in the COP space, we are keeping the cards close to ourselves, right? And not for everybody else to see. And I think my experience is a lot is actually gained by laying it out. Yes, you will have more conversations, but as long as you have programs that can pass the red face test, and you are willing to have the conversation, it's better than having a lot of conversations that are going on in the corridors and behind the scenes, and that you don't have access to. You cannot impact them, you cannot control them. So kind of radical level of transparency in the spirit of not non-compliance, but just being a little contraire, so to speak.
No, that's great.
This has been great, Jesper. I say it's been great to meet you, and it's good to be a gooner.
Good to be a gooner.
Yeah, I don't want to chant for Paul, but it's good to be a gooner. Yeah. And definitely, look forward to catching the match over there. Yeah. No, I've been 3 matches this year. We went up to Villa and saw it, which was a sad state, but we went up to Villa and saw that. So we'll definitely catch up over there next time at Emirates.
I look forward to that, Sean. I look forward to that.
Thanks for coming on, Jesper. Thanks for not picking a particularly embarrassing story, which meant I didn't have to pick one, sort of likewise, which is always a good place to land. That's right. A future time, we can really let out the after dark version of Totally Rewarding Chats can end up with like we've been to Vegas together. So let's just say, right? Like,
well, but you're not allowed to stay there. You've been to, what happens at Vegas is supposed to stay in Vegas.
But it was a sales kickoff. So does that really count? I don't know. But anyway,
it's funny. On that note, we had our sales kickoff in Vegas. I was not going this year, but my last message to the entire sales team was, what stays in Vegas, or what happens in Vegas, does not stay in Vegas. It comes back to me. And then I had to do it the week after. So behave, which people did.
That's right. But you've become such an adult, Jesper. Like,
yeah, I know, boring.
Who let that happen? Well, awesome. Thank you again for your time. Super helpful to sort of hear your perspective and swap some stories.
Appreciate it.
Wonderful.
Yeah.
Thanks for the time, guys.
Yeah. Thanks.